Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome all of you to Kentucky Horse Park. Thank you for coming out on this blustery day. I'm Kathy Hopkins. I'm the equine director for the park. And as we gather here for the third time to reminisce and celebrate the life of one of racing's brightest stars, we realize just how Cigar and those that went before him, including the greats John Henry and Ali Sheba, captured the hearts of all who were lucky enough to know them. All three came to greatness along totally different paths, but all possessed the magic that made them special. How lucky we have been here at the Kentucky Horse Park to care for the wonderful equine souls who have passed through our Hall of Champions. At this time, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Park, Mr. Jamie Link. He was previously Deputy Executive Director of the park and the CEO of our World Games, and most recently, Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Brashear. We are so happy to have Jamie back to lead our Horse Park family.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all the fans who have come from across the country to pay tribute to Cigar. Incomparable, invincible, unbeatable. And thank you to those here today who played a direct part in his extraordinary career, including Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron, who rode him during his early racing years. Chris. We'd like to extend a special thank you to the veterinarians at Haggard Medical and Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital who worked so hard to save Cigar's life, including Doctors Rocky Mason, Laura Warner, Stephen Reed, and Dr. Brett Woody. And finally, a thank you to the Kentucky Horse Park and Hall of Champions staff who loved and took such special care of Cigar while he was here at the Hall of Champions. Cigar was an incredible racehorse who, by carrying the red, white, and blue of the Allen Paulson stables, racing on both the East and West Coasts, and representing the United States while winning the first Dubai World Cup, became a fan favorite and was, and always will be, known as America's horse. Cigar was the all-time leading money winner at the time of his retirement, just $185 short of $10 million. He tied the winning streak with a great citation by crossing the wire first in 16 consecutive races. He won the Breeders' Cup Classic and was inducted into the Hall of Fame on his first try. Cigar won the hearts of all who were lucky enough to know him, and fans who would drive hundreds, even thousands of miles in order to spend time admiring him during his 15 years at the Kentucky Horse Park. He was a tireless ambassador for thoroughbreds, thoroughbred racing, and the Kentucky Horse Park. He never ceased to thrill and amaze those who visited him, and his invincible spirit and beautiful conformation. We will all miss him, but we will never forget his spirit and determination. Please plan on joining us next year when we celebrate the 20th year of the Breeders' Cup win and unveil his permanent bronze. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And now I'd like to welcome Hall of Fame jockey and a good friend to all of us, Mr. Chris McCarron.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Jamie, for the nice introduction. I was fortunate enough to ride Cigar twice. The first time I rode him was in a maiden special weight race on the grass at Del Mar, and he won. The next time I rode him was about 3 weeks later. It was an allowance race at Del Mar, and he finished second. So what I like to tell people that I was fortunate enough to ride Cigar, but when I had the mount on him, he was only a cigarette. Not quite as big a horse. And so the next time he ran was in the Ascot Stakes at Bay Meadows. And unfortunately, I was tied up. I had to ride in New York that weekend, so Pat Valenzuela rode him, and he won. And then his next start was under the care of Billy Mott. Alan Paulson, who owned the colt, sent him to Billy at Belmont Park, and the rest, as they say, is history. Billy did an outstanding job conditioning the horse, keeping him sound all those years, and I'd just like to correct one comment that Jamie made. He didn't win just 16 consecutive races. It was 16 consecutive stakes races. That's a whole other level. The one thing I appreciated about Cigar going to New York was that I didn't have to chase him very often. Because I was based in Southern California, and I didn't go to New York to ride against him very often. And fortunately, he didn't come to California to run very often either. So I got to watch him win on TV all the time. I didn't have to chase him around the track. I'm very impressed with the attention that this horse has given to horse racing all across the country for many, many years, even in the wake of his death. And I appreciate all of you coming out here on this freezing cold day in November to pay your respects and show your appreciation for what an outstanding job this horse did at promoting horse racing. And love you, fans. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much, Chris. And at this time, we'd like to have more of an up-close and personal from the staff of the Kentucky Horse Park. Two of those people that have cared for him over the 15 years that he was here and got to know him on a very, very personal level. And the first person I'd like to call to say a few words would be Robin Bush, and she cared for him and looked after his needs for most of the 15 years that he was here. So, Robin, if you could say a few words.
Hello. I'm very impressed with the crowd today. Thank you guys so much. As some of you know, I like to write. Some people say I'm pretty good, so some people wanted me to say something. Unfortunately, I'm better at writing than speaking, but I think it'll go okay. Well, what can you say about Cigar? Something that can even begin to capture the immensity of who he was and why he affected people so profoundly. I can only barely brush on what, to me, made him so special, and I know to a lot of other people. He was an astonishingly gorgeous horse, for one thing, and he seemed entirely aware of that fact. I swore he thought himself the greatest thing on the earth, and he expected everyone else to agree. And anyone who spotted him racing and frolicking in his paddock, or reaching to the heavens in a breathtaking rear, or simply fixing that white-rimmed eye on something in the distance, could believe, if just for that moment, that he was indeed the most magnificent of all of God's creations. That he truly had everything. He is the definition of magnetic. He is the definition of perfection. We all love Cigar for so many reasons. Of course, we were captured by his racetrack feats and attitude and style with which he achieved his glory. We loved him even more, everyone did, for who he was. His personality was gigantic. He challenged us handlers almost constantly to see if maybe just this one time we let him be in charge. He persistently grabbed at you at the shank, but he was always plain, never mean. He could be remarkably gentle around children, and in other rare occasions in which he presented it briefly, a more tender side that he seemed to want to keep the secret. A few favorite traits that so endeared him to folks are foremost in my mind, like striking such stunning, kingly poses during the daily presentations here in the pavilion, persisting with any act that garnered applause or laughter from the audience, like continuous melodramatic yawning, and tilting his nose skyward and flipping that lip up with a mischievous eye, throwing his front legs forward and then stretching blissfully back like a dog in almost a bow, and soaring around his paddock with pure freedom and joy and abandon. No matter how often I saw him run, rear, or roll, I was in awe every time. And I believe everybody else was when they saw that too. It felt like being given a very special gift to be able to witness that. Now, we each no doubt have personal stories about this phenomenal animal. They may be memories of Cigar's candy antics witnessed in person, or of being overwhelmed, even watching on television, by the power of his smooth, reaching stride. Was he drove to victory over and over again. It doesn't matter if you had the honor of working with him, visited him every year, or never even saw him in person at all. He did something to people. And I'm sure that everyone has their own tales to tell of how this brilliant horse has touched their lives. And I hope we're sharing a lot of them here today. So my thoughts since Cigar passed have been with all of those who had the extreme privilege of working with him in any capacity throughout the years, and to all of his marvelous fans, you guys. And as you know, we can appreciate how much you loved him and the loss that you feel along with us. Cigar loved being around people, especially people who adored him. So I like to think he's with us right now, basking in the adulation of this group of admirers that gathered here only for him. And bounteous and exclusive attention is what Cigar seemed to crave above perhaps all else. So we're glad that you're here today, continuing to give him what he so deserved and commanded. And maybe this is cliche, but I know that he'll continue to be in all of our hearts and memories forever. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. And I guess I'm giving our next speaker a hard act to follow. But I'd like to introduce Mr. Wes Lanner. He's the manager of our Holland Champions. And actually, Wes was the very first manager of the Holland Champions when John Henry came here. And he went on to a stellar career as a stallion manager for Three Chimneys Farm and for Overbrook Farm. And then we were able to recapture him and bring him back to the Kentucky Horse Farm. So I'd like for Wes to come forward.
I think in horse racing, we're always looking for the next great thing. And sometimes we tend to put that label on horses that maybe haven't earned it in our desire to have it. Cigar earned it, and he proved it every time a bridle was put on it. From a field he shared with his dam in Bel Air, Maryland, to a group of yearling colts at Brookside Farm, to the Sandy Ovals in Elmont, Arcadia, Dubai, Chicago, Cigar defined greatness for his generation. He was twice a Horse of the Year, member of the Racing Hall of Fame, and retirement as racing's brightest and yes, richest star. He was and will always be America's horse. How appropriate that he would be guided by a pilot adorned in red, white, and blue. When he left racing, we all waited for that time when we could watch his progeny find their legs and light up the racing world. But sadly, that was not to be. His second career was over before it ever really started. And that disappointment was somewhat tempered over time because of what became his new calling as an ambassador to the fans of racing and a beacon to those who had not yet discovered the pageantry and drama that a good day at the races can present. He was available right here, 7 days a week at the horse park. So many times my colleagues and I heard the whispers, "Look, over there, that's Cigar." I saw him at Belmont once. Had met the fans on their cigar pilgrimage from Massachusetts or California or Australia and elsewhere, and had seen the faint beginning of a tear or a gush of him caused by just being there with him. He had that presence and power. So his second incarnation became a third, and that is how I knew Cigar best. The ambassador patiently waiting for a shutter to click, regal and handsome and keenly aware of who he was. Running down to his corner, to rear up to almost vertical, and maybe have a roll right there, next to where he rests now. Just giving a glimpse of a racetrack glory past. Maybe that was the plan for Cigar, and he executed it perfectly. When I started writing this, at the end of the day, I realized I could not properly pay tribute to Cigar without thanking a large team that were there for Cigar and the 8 others that fall under our care. Butch Simpson is an old horseman I've known for a long time. We've worked together for over 30 years. Thank you, Butch. Gene Carter, has worked with horses since he was 15 years old. That's 70 plus years of service. He was there with Doug Davis leading stakes winners all over the country. Gene sat on Man of War. His father-in-law was Will Harvard, always a big red side. Thank you, Gene. The veterinarian and therapy team that has been here working and treating and doing what they know best. Doctors Werner and Mason were here at the start. Mimi Porter and her skilled therapy team very early on. Heather Brinkman with her skilled touch. Dr. Torres, who not only treated Cigar, but was a great instructor and was patient in his explanations of his work. Doctors Reed and Woody, who along with Dr. Wormer, teamed on the surgery. The folks at Hager, Davidson, McGee, and Rudin Riddle, they were patient with Cigar and with us. I can be a bit of a mother hen when one of the guys is in a clinic, and you all were wonderful. And I thank you for the chair for my screaming niece. Kathy Hopkins and Robin Bush, always there, ready to go and do whatever needs to be done to take care of all the horses here at the Hall of Champions and beyond. Thank you. John Bayou keeps the park's horses' feet trimmed and tidy, but you can always tell Cigar had a special place with him. Thank you. Kathy Roby, who is taking care of him now. So much a friend to Cigar and so many of the other greats here. We miss you and appreciate all you mean to the park and the Hall of Champions. We have a faithful, hardworking band of volunteers ready to spring into action where needed. We all thank you. Steve Brown of Sally Horse Fans and the Haggard Out Ambulance Crew. I'm sorry I don't know your names, but thank you so much. And of course the fans, thank you for your expressions of sympathy and condolences, your flowers, your cards. You come from all over the world in pilgrimage to see the horses you so dearly love. And racing fans, you are a special group. None more dedicated to their heroes can be found. I've done this for a long time with some great horses, but you never cease to amaze me with your dedication. Thank you. I hope we haven't forgotten anybody. It's a long list, but it wasn't intentional if we did. But this is a lot of help from a number of caring people. Mostly we thank Cigar for showing his class and greatness embodied in a magnificent thoroughbred. We will all cherish your memory. It was our privilege and honor to have known you and for a short time to have walked in your light. And thank all of you for coming out on a blustery day to honor a great horse and friends. Enjoy some coffee and watch a video. But I'd like to finish up in the way I think is most appropriate for today. So enjoy this.
Cigars just walked. So, what's about it? It was Cigar, much the best. And Cigar running a monstrous race today to win